Pod in My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Pod in My Noggin. And on this week's episode, I am excited to have Morgan Scafe, who is here to talk about a whole gamut of things, but also her book that has just recently come out. So we'll be talking about that. And we were supposed to film this episode yesterday, but AWS decided to flip that on its head, and that didn't happen. So here we are today, and we're actually filming it. So I'm excited that we did get to connect and have this conversation. So welcome to the show, Morgan.
Thanks, EK. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm glad that we were able to make it work. So you have what I would say an uncomfortable story to share about your life. And I say uncomfortable because I think that sometimes people find the topic uncomfortable, but it's a necessary story to share. Do you want to talk about the beginning days? What was young Morgan like?
Before my life kind of went down the wrong path and ended up becoming a train wreck, I was a pretty good student. I was pretty tenacious. I was a tomboy. I was outside playing and hunting all the time. We lived on a lot of land, and I was a pretty carefree, happy-go-lucky kid. I had a fairly dysfunctional home life, so there was that kind of thrown in there. My mom was abused as a child, but did not deal with it and did not heal her trauma. And unfortunately, she took to dealing with it through drinking. And so I already kind of had a difficult path at that point, but I was still pretty, easygoing, happy, fun, tenacious little girl, just running all the countryside and riding my bike everywhere, just living in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, living on my bike, going wherever I wanted to. It was awesome. And then
Back in the good old days.
Changed. Yes.
Back in the good old days, which for me, it's so funny to say that out loud because it dates me, right? I'm 44 and I grew up in the 90s. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Things were just very different back then. It's more simpler, I think. But so you were your above average child. Sounds to me like you were out playing all the time, living your life, doing those things. But then something shifted. Something happened within the home that shifted that greatly.
Yes. Yeah. We live in a small community, and we live in the area of where General Motors was thriving at the time. And we had an influx of community members in our town, and the high school became overcrowded. And so they had to do a split day. And my mom did not care for what was happening within the public school system back then. And so she pulled all three of us out and put us in the private school. And that's where I met a new friend, and her home life was extremely violent and abusive. And I got caught up in that, just befriending her and going over to her house. I was liking it over there at the beginning because her mom was always home. There was always food on the table. They had a lot of brothers and sisters. We had a great time playing outside. But then, lo and behold, her father was a monster, and I didn't know it. And he was abusing all of the kids. But my friend, he was sexually abusing her. And I got caught up in that situation very quickly, very violently, and was silenced immediately and threatened to not tell or let anyone find out or anything like that, all the threats that they do. And it just snowballed. The whole situation continued to escalate and snowball. For almost 8 years, I was mixed up in that before I was able to get myself out.
How old were you when this started first happening?
I was 8 and I just went into the 3rd grade.
How old was
Hmm.
your friend? Same age group, same grade?
Yes, right. Yep, we were in class together. And I went over there and we were playing one afternoon and she went to her room to find some more Barbie doll clothes and didn't return. And so I went to look for her and I found her dad in her room and he was kneeling in front of the bed and I thought he was fixing it or making it or doing something, but I didn't realize she was behind him on the other side and he was molesting her. And I caught them both by surprise. And when I said something, he turned around and grabbed me and threw me up against the wall and had just a death grip on my arm and started threatening me immediately. I mean, I was so confused and in shock. My mind was just spinning and whirring. I'm like, what is going on? And then he tried to shove his hand down my pants and I started screaming. And he threatened if I ever spoke of what happened, he would kill me. And then he left the room and he left us both standing there and I was just absolutely dumbfounded. I could not understand why, what he did. I assumed that I had done something wrong to make him mad. And so I'm thinking, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? And when I tried to ask my friend about it, uh, she said, it looks like it's getting dark. You better go. And I said, yeah, I think I better go. And I left and went home and was too afraid to speak about it, was too afraid to tell anybody because I kept thinking I was going to get in trouble. I did something wrong, so I was going to be punished. So I just didn't say anything at all.
Oh, wow. So in my brain, like it's so explosive because like you're 8 years old, you're at your friend's house, you're just playing, frolicking about, right? Like an 8 year old would with Barbies, enjoying your time. Your friend goes in the house to grab some clothes, and you're like, gee golly gosh, where's this person? And you go in after, you're so innocent in that moment. You walk into the room, you see something that you probably don't even really know what's happening, as you just said. And then he threatens you. I can only imagine the level of fear and confusion. Like I can only imagine what 8 year old Morgan was experiencing in that moment. And then you just said something it that resonates with me in the sense that I know that when you are abused as a child or you go through some sort of a trauma, whether it's at home or close to home at somebody else's home, you look inward
Mm-hmm.
to blame. Like it's such a common thing, right? Because that man's an authority figure to you. That's your friend's father. So you automatically look inward and start wondering, like, what did I do wrong? And then in the process, start convincing yourself that you're the monster. They're not the monster. You're the monster. You must be broken or bad or something to have that happen. And so you go home, you don't say anything, obviously, because you're probably scared, and forgive me for swearing, but shitless. Like that's just not a normal experience. It's not something you saw at the playground. Like that is earth shattering.
No.
So you don't say anything. What happens next? You said it was 8 years. Did you obviously remain friends with your friend, correct?
Yes, we did stay friends. I did not go back to her house for several several weeks. Best I can remember, it was like 3 to 4 weeks that I didn't go back over there. We maintained a friendship at school. I tried, I'm the new kid at school, so I'm trying to make friends. I tried to make friends with some other girls, but ultimately, my friend talked me into coming back over, and I said, "Well, just after school," and I wasn't going to stay for dinner. And we were playing outside, but now it's getting cold. We're Midwest, so it's starting to head into winter, and we played outside for a couple times, and then I started going back again. He was a farmer, and so he was not home all the time at that time frame. They were pulling the crops, so he wasn't there. So it felt safe again.
Mm-hmm.
I felt okay about it. I started playing after school, and then I started going back into the house, playing in the house, and then felt like, okay, I obviously did something. He was really pissed about something and whatever that reaction was. So I'm just trying to talk myself through it. And I talked myself right into going back over there again. And then I was invited to sleep over and I stayed the night and I woke up to him in my room kneeling beside my bed now. And he's molested me again in the night and was pretty aggressive, pretty violent, was holding his hand over my mouth, keeping me from screaming, crying, trying to, yeah, I'm just sobbing. And he's got a death grip on one arm. He's fondling me with another hand. He's trying to cover my mouth. He's like got a death grip on my arm at times. And then when he was done, he just stood over top of me with one hand on each of my arms and just drove me into the mattress as deep as he could and said, "If you fucking tell, I will kill you." And I didn't even know what I was supposed to tell. I mean, I had no frame of reference as to what the hell was even going on. And so I didn't tell. And then for a little bit, I didn't go back again. And then when I did go back, he hurt me physically so bad and told me if I don't keep coming back over there, he's going to tell my parents what a whore I am. And they're going to kick me out. And I'm not going to have a place to live. And nobody sets out to raise a whore for a daughter. I mean, it was just the biggest mind, that you could ever imagine. And I didn't know what was going on. And so now I'm being threatened that I have to go back and he's going to tell if I don't. And I didn't know if I was going to get in trouble for telling, not going over there, and being involved with the situation to begin with, what he was doing to me in my body. I mean, I just had no frame of reference. And my friend wasn't helping. She wouldn't even acknowledge it was occurring. She acted like she didn't know what I was talking about. And I understand what that is now, but I can appreciate why and how that happened. I mean, she was so dissociative and so ingrained from birth to accept their family dynamics that it was, she couldn't understand why I was even upset. And every time I tried to talk to her about it, she just ignored me, dismissed it, blew me off. And so I was just getting driven deeper and deeper into the situation and more isolated from everybody. And I had no one to turn to. And it just continued to escalate until the point where he had ultimate control over me, to the point where I was an extension of his other children and he could do whatever he wanted to me. And he proceeded that way for the next 8 years, and it just continued to escalate and get worse with what he was doing. The more he felt comfortable that I was silenced, the more it escalated.
As abusers do. I mean, from an outsider looking in, you kind of have like the whole flush of emotions, right? Like you're thinking, okay, well, why did she help? Why all of those things? But at the same time, I'm also thinking she was probably also scared. She probably was also so, like you said, entrenched and had very little frame of reference to know that like this was her life, right? And I wonder if there were times where, and I don't know the answer to this question. We would never know the answer to this question. But were there times subconsciously that when it was you, it wasn't her, right?
Yeah, that was that was the case, very much so.
Right. So it's it's not fair because she shouldn't have had to be in that situation to start with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just not one of those situations where you can cast judgment on somebody in that situation at
Right.
all. And the same kindness that I would extend to you, I'd extend to her, despite what their role was in it. For instance, so he was so you would have had to. So this happened for 8 years. So in that 8 years, you would have gone through puberty, and at some point, you said he progressively got worse in what he was doing. So he must have graduated from molestation to rape, is what I would assume. at some point. When did you first know within that 8 years that you had to get away? Like, do you have a moment where that sort of things became a little bit clearer as to what was happening and you realized that I'm unsafe or I need to get away, but can I get away? Like, did that happen at all?
It did. It was later, probably between my 12th and 13th birthday. I started seeing all the contradictions, all the manipulation, all the lies, and all the things that didn't make sense. Like he would, for example, one time he wanted me to perform oral on him, and I just wasn't having it. And I fought him all the time and suffered the consequences of it dearly. But I started acting up, and he stopped. And he's like, let's see what your mother would think about this. And he went over to the phone and picked up the phone as if he was going to call my house and tell my mom what I was doing with him. And I freaked out and started crying and begging him and telling him that I would comply. I would do what he wanted. So he basically had me begging him to not tell my mom and fall in line. And it that was probably when I was like 10. And by the time I'm 12 and 13, I'm like, wait a minute. When I got home, my mom wasn't even home. She wouldn't have answered the phone. I'm starting to like put all this together like, you dumbass. You have fallen into the worst trap imaginable and believed everything that he said because he was an adult. And I was just absolutely turned upside down in my mind as far as what to know, what to believe, what to think. And finally, it started coming together between 12th and 13th year that I was set up, that I was picking up the slack for my friend, like as you suggested. Yes, I was absolutely. She was benefiting from my staying over. And then I also realized what he was doing was a crime and that he's going to be the one that's going to get punished. But he had already done so many things that had made me absolutely terrified to speak out that I just kept my silence, even knowing what I had gotten myself into. And then probably right before my 16th birthday, I'm 15 and freshman in high school, is when I decided that all of those threats and all of those years of him saying he would kill me if I didn't return, if I didn't keep coming back over, if anyone found out that I would die, he would kill me. I wouldn't live long enough for people to believe me. I just, at some one point in that year, I snapped and said, I would rather be dead than have him have him on top of me, have him doing these to me. I would rather be dead. And so I just walked out the door. After almost 8 years, I just walked out the door and said, fuck this. I am never, ever going back. And when he comes to kill me, thank God, I will
Did he
welcome
pursue you
that.
at all?
Yes, he was constantly like calling the house, driving behind like either my mom, very closely. She just didn't understand what was happening. He would start to drive up the driveway. He would show up to where we were, like at the grocery store. He would come to the school and sit in the parking lot in his car, even though his kids rode the bus. He would just be sitting there watching me. So he always seemed to know where I was, what I was doing, when I was lying about, I can't come over because I have to go out with my parents. I mean, it's like I don't know. I don't know how he knew some things that he did, but I think that my friend was feeding him information, which is really hard for me to swallow that
Fair.
pill. But
No, yes, I understand that. But also, I just think that people who do these sort of things are just they just have heightened abilities to gather information. Charming in a way that they can ask somebody a question that it doesn't send off flags. They're just and like the thing is like I'm mindful of time, but I wanted to talk about like the 8 year period, like when someone gets abducted, like right, and tortured.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, the torture, the rule or the goal usually is to create a level of psychological conditioning. And in doing so, it makes the abducted compliant, fearful, and it can shift who they are almost entirely. So to me, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, you started to go through puberty, you started to put two and two together. And then just before 16, you were like, okay, like I'm done. And and you accepted in your head, the risk of being done. So like
Yeah.
I think anybody listening, you have to recognize like how heavy that would be, like how much you would have had to carry to be like, you know what, if he comes and kills me, he comes and kills me. I'm not going back. I prefer death over this. That's heavy for a 15-year-old. It's heavy for any child, right? So he actively pursued you. He was gaining information. Like I always kind of knew where you were. I have a couple questions. Throughout this period at home, were there any physical manifestations of abuse on you that was noticed by anyone outside of that particular circle?
Oh yeah, all the time. But that is where um, so just to back up a little bit, the first book that I wrote, I my time was right when I was getting out of abuse until the trial was over. But in that time of writing that story and people reading it, they kept asking me, why did you go back over there? Um, why did no one notice what was happening to you? Why didn't your parents ask you about all of the physical manifestations of the abuse? Why wasn't the teachers calling child protective services? And, I understand the questions and they're totally valid. And so I decided to write a second memoir about it. And I backed it up and started from the very beginning of the abuse and met up with the first book and wrote it from a child's perspective and what I was thinking, what I was going through, and explained all of that because every adult in my life failed me until I got to high school, including the school, including the teachers, including, unfortunately, my parents, whom I absolutely love dearly. And we've worked through, what happened and all of that, and a lot of forgiveness. Um, my sisters have apologized profusely for driving me over there. I'm like, we were all kids, but you know, every adult failed me. And that's what my second memoir is about because we get so caught up in our world and our lives and don't want to see things going on around us, the oddities next door, or, your friend, your daughter's friend is acting bizarre, or, all these things that we just don't want to see and look at because they make us uncomfortable. And God forbid we have to say anything or speak up to report it, whether you call the
Mm,
school, whether you call CPS, whether you call a parent. Nobody wants to kind of be in that situation. It's very difficult and hard. And then there's the voice in the back of their mind saying, well, what if I'm inaccurate? What if the
yeah.
child's behavior isn't a reflection of abuse? And so every adult failed me, and I had marks and bruises and broken bones and shit I had to hide that was like, pulling magic out of my behind, trying to hide all of what he did to me. It was horrific. I mean, it was paramount torture, and I still have many, many physical ramifications of it. I've had probably 15 surgeries to repair the damage that he did to me physically. And I still live with a lot of physical ailments because of it. And it was very obvious when I was in those years that I was being abused. But the adults, for whatever reason, and each adult can explain why they chose not to speak up. And I'm sure it was for a different reason for everybody, but every adult failed me. and we have to do better. We have to do better for our children, and we have to put our uncomfortableness aside and speak up and report whatever it is that we feel seems off. You have to say something to somebody.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I'm not sure if you'd be able to get through that 8 year period now in life and have those same things happen to you because people are more aware
Mhm.
of the sickos that are out
Yes.
there. But there's so
Right.
much I think there's a level of just natural humanness when it comes to they see something, but they're like, nah, you had mentioned at the beginning of at the top of the show that you had said that you were a tomboy, you rode your bike everywhere, all of those things. So I wonder how often someone might have saw something and then they probably fell off their bike or didn't seek to know more, but just brushed it away. And I don't know if it was always maliciously or don't want to deal with this in a conscious way, but you're right. We need to pay attention and we need to speak up. And the thing is I don't know. I know for me, if I were to see there's some kids in the neighborhood, I'm not close with them, but if I were to see a kid start walking around in a cast, and then a couple weeks later they got band-aids on, I would feel compelled to ask them if they're okay. Now, I know they might say to
Hmm.
me, oh, I'm totally fine and everything's fine. I'm just clumsy, whatever the abuser put in their mind. And it may be nothing, but at least, ask if they're okay. Maybe at some point that kid will be like, I'm not okay. Maybe I should tell that nice gentleman that I'm not okay or whatever. I don't know. But ask, monitor. Um, yeah, you don't want to call CAS or stir up shit, but at the same time, when some things are obvious over an 8 year period, come on.
Yeah.
And I'm not throwing shade
Yeah.
at anybody. I'm just saying, you're. That's why I had to ask that question. I'm like, you're going through all of this. You're going home. You're going to school. People had to see. People had to wonder why you were always hurt, right? So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the trial and your two books. We'll be right back, everybody.
Partner today with CK Sims and Pod and My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we have been talking to Morgan Scafe, and she has been telling us about her absolutely tragic childhood from 8 years on. So before that, kind of an average life, above average girl living an average life. And then you started being abused by your friend's father. This lasted for 8 years. It was ugly and painful and absolutely awful and deplorable. And just before your 16th birthday, you decided that you were okay with the idea that he would kill you as long as he couldn't touch you anymore. And you walked
Right.
away. After that experience, after walking away and him obviously stalking you, did you did he get you again after that? Was he successful
No.
in reeling you back in? So there was no, you were able to completely just walk away and leave. That's amazing. I love this. At what point, so you're a 16-year-old girl, you've walked away, you have this guy who is threatened to kill you. he's in town, you're living your life, you're always looking over your shoulder, I can imagine. And what happens next? What point did you say, okay, I'm going to come forward?
Well, the high school I was in, I was there for a year while still being abused, and it was completely the opposite of the grade school I was in. They were noticing the marks, the bruising, the walking funny, the weight loss, the depression, and they were constantly trying to engage me in conversation about it. And that was is one of the reasons, besides the fact that I couldn't take it anymore, that I knew I had to get out. We were going to get caught because now I'm in a school that cares. Now I'm surrounded by people that are questioning everything, and I'm absolutely panicking. And I finally told a teacher that I had been molested. Not that I was currently still in the situation, but I made it be that it was in the past. And then I was sent to the school counselor and spent many hours with her, but not talking about what happened to me, just sitting there and basically her trying to understand what was going on with me. And then I got so depressed and suicidal that they called my parents and said she needs to go into therapy outside of the school. And my mom did, but the first session was, here's what I have to report. And so I sat there for a year and a half in the therapist's office, not saying anything about what happened because she would have had to have reported. And
And then what
and then
age
when
was this?
that was the rest of my high school years.
Okay.
So up until just before my 18th birthday, I couldn't say anything that had happened to me because it would have to be reported. So I just sat in that therapist chair and talked about whatever. And then after high school, I moved out of the town I was in because I had to get away from the situation and just get away as much as possible. And I was watching TV and an Oprah show came on, and lo and behold, it's about sexual abuse, what happened to her. And she looked right in the screen and said, if you know about sexual abuse of a child and you have not reported it, you're just as bad as the abuser themselves. And I was like, hell yeah. But then I literally became physically ill and threw up because, hello, that was me. I was completely aware of children being abused in this house, and I was an adult, and I wasn't reporting it, even
Were
though,
there still young children in the house then at that
yes,
point?
oh yes, 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 yes.
Well, I love me some Oprah. Grew up on Oprah. Love
Yeah.
that. Um, I don't know if her comment was meant directed at you, right? But
She was
so,
looking right at me.
well, I can understand how that would play out, right? Like you know what I mean? Like, and
Yes,
the weight of that as
yes.
well. But so you realize that you were an adult now and that you were aware of children that were being abused. So what did you do?
Yep. I completely went into a fit full of rage because the self-loathing that I had for myself was horrific. And once I finally got my act together and my composure, I'm like, okay, you have to do something. You have to stand up and say something. And so I planned it out. I was totally paranoid by this, at this point with all of the brainwashing and everything that had gone on. I was completely paranoid. So I knew I needed to call like Child Protective Services. So I drove back to my hometown to do it because I was afraid they would trace the call, which is so funny now. But I drove back home and used a phone booth. Back then, we had payphones still. And I called Child Protective Services and I reported it and I gave her a whole bunch of information and she kept asking me questions and I continued to give her information after information and she said, I have to stop, but I don't understand. How do you know all this? Are you a sibling in this house? And I said, no, I'm a friend and it happened to me too. And she said, I need you to tell me who you are. And I said, no, I can't. I cannot divulge who this is. I'm not telling you who it is. I just need you to get those kids out of the house. And she said, okay. And then she said to check back. I wouldn't give her my name or phone number, so I had to call her back in a couple weeks to find out, what had transpired. And it's not what I thought it was. It was the most devastating phone call I think I've ever had, because she declared that there were no findings of abuse based off of talking to the two smallest children at school, with the principal, with the mom, asking them if they were being sexually abused, and they denied it. She went to the home and spoke to both the parents, the wife again, and the abuser. And he couldn't understand why anyone would make such allegations. Of course, he doesn't abuse his children. And there were no findings. And they closed the case. And then something, a switch flipped in me. I'm like, son of a bitch, now I'm up. Now you've pissed me off to the point that, yeah, I'll show you no findings. And I was working for a law firm at the time, and I went to one of the only female attorneys, and I said, I have a problem, and I need to figure out what to do. How do I report this? How do I tell? Who do I tell? Where do I go? I just went to CPS, and they shut it down quick as they could. And what's next? And she did a little digging, and she's like, let's go to the Michigan State Police in your hometown and report it. And called and found out who that would be. We made appointments. We kept driving there multiple times. And I sat there for hours with a gigantic Michigan State police officer with the biggest booming voice that was absolutely terrifying. But he wasn't, because he was like a big, huge teddy bear. But now I'm trying to divulge everything divulge what I could and tell him. And we sat there for hours upon hours, days and days of my reporting what I could tell him. And then they took it to the prosecuting attorney to decide if they want to press charges. And they said, absolutely, we do. And it just blew up from there, because they filed 6 criminal charges against him. It was on the front of the paper for days and weeks and months about it. And, my name wasn't in the paper, but everyone knew who it was. It was mortifying. It was a very small town. And they ended up having a preliminary hearing and bound him over for trial. And now I'm faced with having to go through this trial, but no one else in the family was coming forward or speaking up or owning up to what was happening, had happened to me, or was still happening in the home. They all just went deathly silent and never admitted to anything. And so it was me against the world at this trial with this man, trying to save the 2 little kids in the house. That's all I wanted to do. I really didn't want to go through what I did with the trial, because it was traumatizing as the abuse.
Well, you have to relive it. You relived it again when you sat down with the big teddy bear police officer. You relived it again when you gave testimony in court, and you're reliving it in not on your terms, really, technically, in that way. But you felt that you needed to relive it because you were responsible for those people who wouldn't speak for themselves. I have a question.
Yeah, really, okay.
So this happened in the 80s, 90s. To this day, has anyone come forward from the family to corroborate your stories?
My friend, the big teddy bear of a police officer, did everything he could to get her to speak to him and open up about what had happened. And he set up a meeting with her. She did not show up. She's still living in the home, mind you. And so she didn't show up for that appointment. And then he talked to me and said, will you meet with her? Will you talk to her? Will you get her to come forward? And I said, oh my God. I mean, I hadn't seen her in years. I said, I can try. And first she said, I'll meet her in a public place. And my dad said, no, absolutely not. You will not. And so she did finally agree to meet at the police station and meet with me. But I didn't realize that I would be in the room alone with her. The detective left the room and let us have a conversation. And the minute he shut the door, she turned on me and she said, I don't know what the fuck you think you're doing, but you're not going to make it home. She's like, you better keep your goddamn mouth shut. And she just attacked me and came out of a person I had never seen in my life in those years. It was like a female version of him. And I had never seen that side of my friend before, but she was like clawing for her life, to not have this come out. And we, I just started sobbing and I'm like, you have to help your sisters. And she got up and she went to the door and she said, you watch your back. And she walked out the door, went down the hallway, and the detective tried to stop her. He didn't expect her to leave that quickly. And she said, whatever Morgan says is true, and just kept going. And that is the only validation I've ever gotten from anyone in that family. And she did testify at the trial, but not in my favor. She said none of that happened. I made it all up. And his son did too. His wife testified, and they all sat on the stand and lied.
So mind-boggling. So mind-boggling. I mean, I can't even pretend to know, or do we know that if he ever molested the boys, or it was just the girls? Like, do we know that? Or
He was, I never witnessed him with the boys, but we had and this is all in my second book, so I'll just say it, but we had a priest at the school, because it's a Catholic school, who was molesting children, and he was convicted. But guess who he befriended? And he was coming over to help the youngest boy become a better altar boy, and they spent lots of time in his bedroom with the door shut so they could have private time, so he could teach him the right way to be an altar boy. And so I know that happened to the youngest boy. I know that they were beaten so severely. The youngest boy has cognitive issues and has since passed at 45. And so the boys were being beaten to a pulp almost daily. And the girls were being beaten and sexually abused. And then the priest from the church,
they were afraid to ever speak.
it was just horrendous what was going on. It was absolutely insane. And it wasn't until years later that I put it all together as to the priest's role in the whole situation. But what I gathered, he did not allow anyone to report what the teachers were seeing. I came right out and told one of my teachers at that school that I was molested. Nothing was reported. They saw my bruises constantly. One of the secretaries from the office lifted my shirt and said, "What are these bruises?" And I used your excuse. I fell off my bike. And so it was just, like I said, every adult failed all of us, not just me, failed all of us repeatedly for years. And for some reason, that school was just not engaged in helping us at all. It was bury it, bury it, bury it. And now once, it came out what the priest was doing, it became clear as to why nothing was getting reported.
So it came out about the priest before or after your abuser?
20 years later, after my trial.
Oh my God. Okay.
He,
all right.
he
Wow.
got up on the pulpit and admitted to it. I mean, he openly, in a Sunday mass, admitted to it, and he was not prosecuted at that time. It wasn't until 20 years later that he was actually held accountable for it. It's insane.
My brain is gonna explode.
Yeah.
That's another podcast episode, apparently, because
It is.
WTF. let's go back to trial. So you went to trial. You had to face the world, as you said, on your own. Members of the family testified that you were lying, making it all up. What was the evidence and the final verdict in this trial?
Yeah, so basically it was my testimony for 2.5 days, and then multiple teachers, counselors, therapists, and witnesses from the community. Because when I was 16, 17, and 18, I was holding down jobs, and he would show up there, and you would watch me turn white as a ghost and start vomiting. And everyone's like, what is wrong with Morgan? And it was constant. And somebody from the community that recognized him put it together that he was coming in, and that was my reaction. And so she testified to that. And not a lot of like physical evidence anymore at that point, but so just a lot of witness testimony. And the verdict, after I think they deliberated for 3 hours, I believe, and it was guilty on 3 counts of CSC in the first degree. They found him not guilty on kidnapping, and that was related to a specific thing that he had done. And so he was found guilty on 3 counts of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, and he was remanded right then. And then he got 25 to 50, but back in 1992, we did not have truth in sentencing laws. And so he had to do like 2/3 of his lowest number of 25. So he did 20, and he was released in 2012 after 20 years.
What did it feel like for you to see him get that verdict as a
Well,
survivor?
I wasn't in the courtroom. I left. I said, see you later, assholes. I'm out of here. I mean, I did not want the trial, because it was so, I mean, I was in the hospital twice, in trauma facilities that are specifically for, traumatic abuse, and in Wisconsin and Texas, because I couldn't even mentally wrap my head around the fact that I had to see him in the courtroom, sit 10 feet from him, and tell everybody what he did. Every time it got close to the trial beginning, I would completely mentally break down and end up in the hospital. And so when I walked off the stand, I left, and I went and spent time with some friends. And my mom called me and said they found him guilty. And I did go to sentencing, but I didn't speak. I was just not even comfortable doing that. I mean, what are you going to say at that point? I figured he would get the maximum, which he did. But I was able to come out of hiding for the first time. I was 21 at that time when the verdict was read. And for the first time in 21 years, I could live freely. I mean, I was imprisoned that whole time by fear, and I got to live freely. And until he started calling my house from the prison, and I kept getting collect calls from the prison he was in. And then a lot of things happened after that were his doing. And if you want me to go into it, I will, but it's in the book. But just because he was sent to prison, just because he was sent to prison, no.
And there was nothing the police could have done. I'm going to read the book, but I want to know, like, there's nothing the police could have done to sort of prevent some of this stuff from happening after.
They refused. Well, yeah. I reported it. Once I reported the phone calls and I changed my phone number, he was reprimanded, and the calls did stop. One time I was out playing with my dog in the yard, and I looked up, and there's a car sitting in the road taking pictures of me. I'm not sure what that was about. That was traced back to a rental vehicle. And I moved more times than I can remember, trying to just stay under the radar. And then when he was going to be released, I actually moved back home to feel more secure and safer because of all of the support from the community and my family and friends. And the Department of Corrections said that they would keep him out of the county I was living in. And then at the last minute, they went back on their word and said, we have nowhere to put him. We have to put him back in county. And and it was unbelievable. I'm like, this cannot be happening. And the media got involved. The original prosecuting attorneys got involved. Everyone put pressure on the Department of Corrections and said, do not put this man in our community. And so they didn't. But it was every turn I was screwed. I mean, the judicial system for survivors is a joke.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's
In
horrible.
fact, I'm in. This is a bad word to use, but I'm impressed that he got convicted in your case. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yep.
Because the judicial system, and you're in US, I'm in Canada, it fails a lot of people, especially when it comes to crimes like this, right? And so, like, he went away for 20 years, but like, a question just came to me, and I want to ask you it. And I'll let the podcast go longer if I need to. It's my show, so I have that power. But I know you're out here. I kind of want to shift gears, but I want to ask you a question that's just in my mind. It's so bizarre that it came up. Are you tired of him still taking up so much of your life?
Yeah. I'm pretty sick from what happened to me because he did try to permanently silence me and forced a caustic chemical down my throat. And I live off of feeding tubes. And my feeding tube is failing every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. I mean, I'm supposed to go in Friday for a procedure. I'm supposed to go in November for a major surgery. I don't get to eat and drink like normal people. I live off of feeding tubes because of what he did. And yeah, I'm pretty fucking sick of him being in my head and in my body. Quite frankly, he's just ruined my body. And yeah, I'm pretty sick of it.
I was just thinking, we've been here, we've been together now for 55 minutes, and we've been really pretty much talking about your experience with him. So I don't like to go over an hour, but I'd like to take time to just talk about Morgan without him. Because fuck him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Fuck him.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
you have done a lot of really cool things despite what life has thrown your way. So you learned to read at 25. And I'm assuming you moved, that was moving the needle to a more advanced reading perspective, right?
Yes. Yeah, fourth grade.
So, but then you got an undergrad, no? What was your
And
undergrad
master's.
in? Yes, I wanted to get to that. You got your undergrad in, what did you get your undergrad in?
In blind rehabilitation, helping those who cannot see. And my undergrad was social work. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you went and got your master's in gerontology.
Yes.
Which is the study of elderly people?
Yes, study of aging. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, I wanted to make sure I was right and didn't get that wrong. So like you've been put through the ringer, yet your educational purposes, directions were all in the helping field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you feel that
after I Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, after I graduated with my master's degree, I landed just a fantastic job, and I was teaching at a long-term care facility. I was teaching the staff how to be better caregivers for those with Alzheimer's and dementia, and I was running an educational department for 430 staff members. Absolutely loved my job more than anything, loved the people that I worked with. But that's when he was released. And so I left that job, and I am very sad to have even left Kalamazoo. I did not want to move, but we did. And then I became a private caregiver for someone who has dementia, who had dementia, and worked with that individual for 10 years, and just absolutely cherished my time. And he passed. And about 6 months later, I started getting sick. And kind of here we are. But my passion is for, the underdog, for people, for the elderly, for children, for animals. I have a ton of animals that I spend time with every day. I absolutely love horses, cats, dogs, frogs, turtles. I mean, I have a pet turtle in my pond. I feed them worms every day. I'm the one that stops and picks up worms off the sidewalks because they will die, and just, living a great life now. But it's I'm 54 years old.
I'm looking at the image of your book, your first one, Carpenter
Mhm.
Road, Silent Sentence to Silence. And did you send that to me?
No, Amazon wouldn't let me do that. I don't know why.
Why do I feel like maybe it's a premonition? The reason I started looking around is because when I saw that picture, I could feel it like I was holding it in my hand. So that's why I was like, oh, if I held it in my hands, it must be
Mhm.
here. And I started looking. So maybe I
Maybe you
just need to
just
go
saw it
buy the
on,
book.
and maybe you saw it on the computer.
I know, but it's so weird that I felt like I had that book in my hands. So now I need to go buy the book. That's going to go in my Amazon right away. So let's talk about the book. So because fuck him. But it is about the book. So you say you're sick right now. You're 54 years old and you're on feeding tubes. The prognosis is that you're going to thrive. I feel like you're going to thrive. Is that what you feel like is going to
Thank
happen
you.
as well?
I hope so. I mean, they just need to get this situated in my small intestines, and I should be, good to go. I probably won't be going back to eating like normal people, but um, that's okay. It was always such a hassle and dangerous. I was constantly getting pneumonia from aspirating food that eating wasn't fun for me anyway. So it is what it is. But I am finally free of my story because I've put the entire story out there for the world to read. I've kind of like set it down and said, okay, now I'm just going to live my best life I can and enjoy the time I have left and not give it another thought. And I will do podcasts, I'll do speaking engagements. I would love to get involved in legislation because, like I said, the rights for victims is pretty pathetic, and the rights for perpetrators are, I mean, they've got everything afforded to them, and the victims have
Yep.
squat. And that's like,
Yeah.
let's turn that around. Let's turn that around.
Well, it's almost like the emphasis is on innocent until proven guilty, but we're going to put the victim through the absolute ringer,
Yeah.
re-traumatize them 50 times over, and then like put
Yes.
them out to pasture with no resolution. Like that, we see that so often. But I
Hmm.
think if you can say, I would like to get involved in legislation, I believe that Morgan Scaife could be involved in legislation. Like, I could see that for you. And
Hmm.
this story, like, that you came on here today, you're very eloquently spoken. You are able to really convey the things that happened to you. It would be remiss to think that you can just tell this story without having any emotional impact whatsoever, right? But at some point you decided that, almost similar to when you were just before you were 16, you left, and if he came and killed you, he came and killed you at that point. It's painful now,
Hmm.
but you are on a mission to destigmatize this type of conversation and help people get comfortable with speaking up. That's your mission right
Yeah,
now in life?
it is, because I cannot even begin to tell you how many people have reached out to me, that survivors, with their story, never having told any another living soul. And it's like,
Yeah.
why is it like this for survivors? Why are we so shamed into silence? And it's like shame must change sides. That's on my back cover. It has to go back to the perpetrator, and us victims, survivors, must not be silenced anymore. I mean, that we have to destigmatize that shame, because the silence is allowing perpetrators to continue and run amok, and we have to stop that somehow. And I it breaks my heart to hear survivor stories, and then at the end they say, I've never told anybody this. That one gets to me a lot, because I can't imagine having lived my whole life never having divulged what happened to me. I don't think I could have, but to not deal with that level of trauma when you're that little, it just wreaks havoc on your entire life. And then it gets kind of a ripple effect and just spreads to other people, spreads to, you know, children that you may have, or your spouse, or whomever. But my mom didn't heal her trauma, but she dealt with it by drinking, which put me in a compromising situation. And so us staying silent and not dealing with this abuse is just killing us. I mean, it's destroying our society, and we don't even realize it.
Yeah, and the whole shame thing, it's how the abusers move, right? That's their MO, to instill the
Mm-hmm.
shame. But we naturally, as humans, we have shame inherent. We have it, right? In so many different parts of our lives. And then it's that shame that prevents us from speaking, but it's also the perpetrators who are manipulating that shame and blowing it up so that it's impossible to actually come out and speak. Like, I hate that this happens. I hate that there are children in this world, and you yourself, when you were a child and a young woman, had to endure this. It literally makes me sick, and it rots me to the core. And I can only imagine how that feels for someone to hold on to internally for their whole lives, right? And what a number
Yes.
of that emotional trauma does to you physiologically as well. So, your book, Carpenter Road, significance of Carpenter Road.
That's the road it was on, that it happened on.
Uh, Carpenter Road, sentenced to silence. So you are a USA Today and a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Kudos for that. And um, then that's your first book. I want everyone to understand that that's your first book that came out. This is from the time you walked away until the end of your trial. That's the timeline, correct? And then you recently put out Carpenter Road, The Inadmissible Year. And that is from the time you were 8 to just before you walked out, those particular moments.
Yeah. Right,
So is
right.
there going to be a book 3?
I've been asked that a lot. I think, um, people are curious about the recovery process that I went through, but it's pretty boring, and I don't remember most of it. So I probably won't do a third memoir as far as relating to this topic or situation.
Well,
And
that's what, but I'm just saying it doesn't have to be about that situation. I feel like what is what has life looked like for you post this? I think people would be inspired to hear how resilient you've been and what you've
mm-hmm,
gone on to do with your life, right? So these are the things that happened to you, and
yeah,
the things afterward were the things that you made happen. You see,
yes,
so it's a
mm-hmm,
different lens, and you say that you're back in your hometown where it all went down. Right now, this is where you're living currently.
right, yes,
You mentioned to me that your life is great, that you feel that your life is great. You're happy in your life at this moment, despite your
yes,
medical issues, but they're going to resolve themselves. I believe in that. Um,
mm-hmm,
so I think that's the story, right? It's not necessarily about the recovery. It's about Morgan, and maybe the next book is Carpenter Road, fuck him, because the story is
Yeah.
about you and not
Yeah.
him, right? Um,
Yeah.
it has been such a privilege having this conversation with you today. If you could say one thing to the world, and let's just pretend for a minute that I am like the most highly successful podcaster in the world, and I have like 100 million listens per every episode, and you're going to reach 100 million people today. What would you want to say to those 100 people? Like, what would be the one thing that you'd really want?
I want everyone who has gone through what I have, no matter how, I don't know what the right word is, but there's different levels of trauma, there's different levels of abuse. But I want every person on this earth who's been abused to tell somebody, anybody.
I love, I love that.
I just
I
want
love that.
everyone to speak up and not let us be silenced.
And that's the real thing, right? That's the piece is no
Mhm.
more silence.
What if I had
And
told that first instance that I was in that bedroom? What if I had went home and told my mom? What if I had told a teacher that cared? What if I had told another friend's parent? You know, so and so touched me in my private area. I mean, what if I had told at the very beginning? I wouldn't have
do
had 8
you
years of
have
that.
do you have regret surrounding that for not telling the first time?
Yes,
And you hold
yes,
yourself accountable for not saying something in the
no,
first
I
time?
do not hold
Okay,
myself
good.
accountable. No, no, I
Okay,
do not
good.
because yeah, I don't.
We were going to have a come to Jesus conversation, Morgan, because I was going to tell you that you were a child.
No,
And
no, I don't.
yeah, well, we don't know, right? Either.
Mhm.
We don't know if you had said anything that first time, what it would have come of it. Like that's a weird situation that we're in. When things worked out the way that they worked out and you had 8 years of testimony to provide and instances that put him away for 20 years. If you had said something, and I mean, the goal is if that you would have, but you wouldn't have known to. You were scared, you were confused, you were a child. If you had said something that first time, what would the outcome have been? Would he have ever done time? You know what I mean? Like it's.
Yeah,
I
it's
hate
true.
that it happened to you. I absolutely hope that the people of his family find peace, even the ones that they never came out and said anything. But ultimately, I hope that you find peace and continue to find peace and continue to step into your own and get healthy, maybe write another book, get involved in some legislation, and have a TED Talk. Like the world's your oyster. Like make it happen. I believe that, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on the show and for having this conversation with me. Um, like I said, it really was a privilege to get to spend this time with you. Everyone at home, I know what I'm doing right now. I'm going to go add Carpenter Road Sentence to Silence. And Carpenter Road, The Inadmissible Years. Question for you. If people were buying both books at the same time, would you recommend them read the first and the second, or would you say go second first, second or yeah, second first,
Yeah.
first second?
Um, well, first of all, the first one, "Sentenced to Silence," has the entire trial in the book embedded in it, all of the trial transcripts. I
Oh,
I wrote my whole story, read it, and said, "Well, this is boring as hell." And I'm like, well, what am I missing? And my whole story was, about him being prosecuted and going through a trial. So I painstakingly had someone write out this transcripts because it was long story, but all of the transcripts from the trial are in the book. So every other chapter is the trial, and you get to go through the entire trial process with me and how that whole ordeal. But because the statute of limitations was almost running out when I reported it. I was not able to talk about the first 4 years of what happened to me. They were inadmissible because of the statute of limitations. Now, that has changed a bit since my trial, but I couldn't talk about what he had done to his family members, to the other children. That was inadmissible. And I couldn't talk about anything from age 8 to age 12 because of the statute of limitations. And so, I mean, you were right. We were very fortunate he was found guilty based off of what could come out. And about 80% of what happened in the home is not in the first book. It was inadmissible. And so that's why I wrote the second one. I would read Sentence to Silence first, read the trial, go through that, and then read the inadmissible years. That's the order.
I just want to say the fact that there was ever a statute of fucking limitations on child molestation.
Oh, tell me about it.
The point of why the judicial system is shit.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Sentence of Silence first, then the inadmissible years. You can go over to morganscafe.net. So that's morganscafe.net. I'm going to link this in the description as well. They have links to buy the books right there. You can find out more about Morgan. You can read reviews of the books. There's an action section, which with shame must change size. I really love that saying, by the way. We should have buttons. And then you can get into contact with Morgan as well through that page. Get out there and buy that book and support Morgan. And then, but more importantly, it's very important to support Morgan, but more importantly, don't remain silent. See something, say something, know something. And like Oprah said, if you are, I don't remember the exact words you use, but if you are aware of a child being abused in a home and you say nothing, then you were just as bad as the perpetrator. And I think that that's very true. So if you see something, say something, speak up. And then Morgan's one thing to the 100 million people who are going to listen to this podcast is if you have been abused, tell someone, anybody. That's your message. Thank you so much for being a guest. I wish you nothing but the best. And I will send you a review once I read your books. And for everybody at home, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, get out and live your wildest dream.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.